Hi, and welcome to episode 2 of James Talks podcast. So welcome along. Thanks for joining me for this little ramble that I'm about to go on. Today we are talking all about Harry Potter. That's going to be the focus for today's episode. Each episode that I upload will have a particular focus where I'm going to ramble on about certain things, and generally hope to have a particular focus, not go off on too many tangents, but just generally give my views about what I think about certain things. And so Harry Potter is going to be the focus for today. It seemed like a really obvious place to start for my first kind of proper episode because, obviously the last episode that I uploaded was just introducing me, and I'll talk a little bit more about myself as I go through these episodes and so on, so you can get to know the kind of a little bit about the person behind the voice that you listen to and so on. And as I did say in the last one, we might be doing some video podcasts in the not too distant future and so on, rather than just obviously listening to my voice. But that's how we're going to start things off. Harry Potter seemed a logical place to start because most people will have come across to this channel because of the content I've been uploading where I've been reading the Harry Potter stories. And the feedback on those have been so amazing. Some people, have been so complimentary that it's just really humbling. And I've really appreciated the time people have put into actually listening to those. When you're reading away, you don't know if anyone's actually ever going to listen to them. Having read pretty much now the entire volume of Harry Potter, about halfway through Deathly Hallows, so not too far to go now before the whole thing is complete. It's just been, as I say, an amazing experience for me in terms of the feedback I've received. It's something I've always enjoyed doing, reading stories and so on. So to have all those compliments from people to say that it's something that I'm really good at, I've got to be honest, that's a good boost to the ego as well. But anyway, as I said, lots of people have come across here because, first of all, I've put a link to this channel in that Harry Potter channel as well. And a lot of people will have come here because they are interested in Harry Potter. So that's going to be my focus for today. So let's take a little trip down memory lane. 1997, J.K. Rowling releases The Philosopher's Stone. Now, as I have a whole channel that is dedicated to the Harry Potter books and so on, and you'd imagine really that I was there with, day one, I was getting my copy of the Philosopher's Stone, you'd think that would be the case. No, that's not the case at all. I was aware that these books were coming out. I was aware that those books were being enjoyed by people and by children and so on. I started teaching full-time. For those people who don't know, who haven't listened to the first episode, I did explain there I'm a primary school teacher. So elementary, I think it's called in the US, and I've got a lot of people from the US who listen to my Harry Potter content. So I teach children generally from around 7 to 11 years old. So that's generally my focus. And I started teaching full-time in 1998. Seems a lifetime ago, it really does. As a young 22-year-old, that's when I started out. And you can work out my age from that. Getting on a bit, but there we go. 22 years old, I started out in 1998. So The Philosopher's Stone had been out for 1 year when I started teaching. And obviously children were starting to get really interested in it. And back then, I seem to remember it being very much a children's thing. There weren't that many adults that were kind of, really into Harry Potter when The Philosopher's Stone actually came out. It was generally a book that was very much aimed at children to some extent. I mean, I've read it now, and obviously I absolutely love it. But obviously the main characters in Harry Potter and The Philosopher's Stone are 11 years old. And so it does have this feeling of being aimed when your main characters are children and relatively young children, then that does have an impact on the kind of audience that you've got. And obviously, as the books went on, the characters grow older. And so I think a lot of people who really, really got into Harry Potter when they were kind of 11, 12, they grew up with those characters and so on. So there we go, 1998, I start teaching. And I'm very aware of The Philosopher's Stone. And then obviously in 2001, so we're going on 4 years from there now, from the actual book coming out for the first time. 2001, we have the film. Christopher Columbus directs Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the Sorcerer's Stone, I think it's called in America, but in the UK, it's always the Philosopher's Stone. We have Harry Potter on the big screen at the cinema. Now, by this time, again, going into a little bit of detail about me, which I will drip in as I go along, I met my wife we'd known each other for quite a few years before we actually got together, but we got together properly in around about 2001. So we decided to go to the cinema to watch Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone together. Amazing experience. I just remember being absolutely blown away by the actual images, just this magic. It was just this magic place. I always remember sitting in the theatre, sitting in that cinema, looking at that huge screen, and one of the images that always stands out in my mind is that time when the boats, when they've arrived on the Hogwarts Express and they're getting in the boats and they're on the water, and you see Hogwarts for the very, very first time, and you see all those lights and so on, and you see the castle, and I just remember sitting there and thinking, this is amazing. And I remember, I think I turned to my wife, not my wife at the time, my girlfriend at the time, and turned to her and just went, this is awesome. And it really felt like something magical. It really did. I seem to remember it came out relatively near Christmas as well. And it just had, I mean, obviously, the John Williams soundtrack obviously is just incredible as well. It just adds so much to the actual enjoyment of the film as well. The soundtrack, the music, the pictures, and obviously these stellar, actors and actresses as well. So I just remember coming out at the end thinking, that was amazing. So you would think that I immediately went and read the book. No, I did not. I just waited for the Chamber of Secrets to come out. I enjoyed the Philosopher's Stone numerous times. I seem to remember, I think I may have bought the DVD. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. But the next time I enjoyed my next chunk of Harry Potter was when I went to the cinema to watch the Chamber of Secrets. And so, yeah, I went to the cinema, watched the Chamber of Secrets, and really, really absolutely loved it. I think obviously we knew much more about what to expect then from an audience perspective. We knew what it was going to be looking like. Also directed by Christopher Columbus. So there was that continuity as well in terms of the characters. All the characters were obviously 1 year older. And obviously, just that magic feel, like unlike anything else. I still to this day don't think, I grew up, as a massive Star Wars fan. So I absolutely loved, my favorite film as a child was The Empire Strikes Back. In fact, until very recently, my favorite film of all time was The Empire Strikes Back. That has actually been overtaken by now, which sometimes seems really odd to say that I have a film that I enjoy more than The Empire Strikes Back. But I have also, over the last, 10 years or so, become a massive Marvel fan. You can see a theme here of the kind of things that I enjoy, really. Star Wars, Marvel, Harry Potter. I love my fantasy. I love my sci-fi. It's something I've always been into. So, yeah, you can call me a big nerd if you want or whatever. I don't care. That's my genre that I absolutely adore. So, really got into the Marvel stuff. And Avengers Endgame, for me, was the first film to actually surpass The Empire Strikes Back as my favourite film of all time. But the Harry Potter films are right up there, particularly, and I will go into, as this video goes on, I will go into my favourite books and also my favourite films, and there is a correlation between the two and so on. But yeah, that's been really, that's something that I will go into in a short while. Anyway, going back to, obviously, the Chamber of Secrets, absolutely loved it. And you'd think to yourself, right, okay, so you've massively enjoyed Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and you've massively enjoyed Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. So surely now you're going to go and read the books. I mean, and the next book that comes out, I mean, you know that the next book is The Prisoner of Azkaban, so you might as well go and read it, because you're obviously enjoying this. No, I did not. I waited for The Prisoner of Azkaban to come out at the cinema. By this point, for me, Harry Potter was Daniel Radcliffe. Hermione was Emma Watson. Ron was Rupert Grint. These were the characters, but these were also the people I pictured all the time. I think, one of the things that people have complimented me on with my reading of the stories, the reading of the actual books, is that I do the characters' voices. And I do as much as I possibly can base them on the films. Some people might not like that. And the people who are reading the books for the very first time, my mum, for example, read the books before that she watched the films. And so her pictures, her images of what those characters actually looked like were somewhat different. When I actually read the books, all the images I'm seeing are generally from the films, whereas people who read the books before they watched the films, particularly if you read The Philosopher's Stone and then the first film didn't come out for another 4 years, your picture of what those characters look like is completely based on the film. Completely based on the book. You're not actually seeing Harry Potter as Daniel Radcliffe at all. I expect most people started to, and obviously the books and the films they kind of caught up in terms of what was going on. But so by the time the Deathly Hallows, for example, was coming out, the Half-Blood Prince was coming out, as books. Then obviously the first films had already been out. So I think most people then started to picture those actors. But yeah, like I was very much a film person at this point. So that's where my general knowledge of Harry Potter was coming from. And then obviously they went on. I think The Prisoner of Azkaban as well. I love The Prisoner of Azkaban, and I remember thinking, first of all, the characters felt it was the first film. I think Harry and Hermione and Ron both feel all three of them feel very young. All the characters, all the main the pupils at Hogwarts, for example, still feel very young in the Chamber of Secrets. 1 year older than obviously they do in the Philosopher's Stone, but still very, very young overall. The Prisoner of Azkaban was the first time where they felt slightly older. I've seen that actually. The director of the Prisoner of Azkaban made a point of thinking, right, these are now sort of teenagers. Effectively, these are 13 years old, so these are teenagers. We're going to start to act with them a little bit differently. We're going to treat them as slightly more grown-up characters, and it does feel that way. I absolutely love. I always think The Prisoner of Azkaban is so clever. The way, for example, there are bits that, it's one of those films that's great to watch back, and a book that's great to read back as well. But I love the fact that, there's stuff that happens, and you have no idea what it's like. Like, for example, you hear Hermione call, but you don't know what it is. You see, for example, the stones thrown into Hagrid's hut, and you have no idea what's going on. And then, of course, we get the time turner, and obviously they go back, Hermione and Harry go back in time, and they're able to actually then see themselves effectively doing these things. And I always thought that was so clever. It's just one of those things that I thought, do you know what, that it just felt like a really, really clever movie, and a clever, obviously, say clever movie, a clever book. I've got to be careful there, because obviously this all came from the books in the first place. I thought that was so brilliantly written by J.K. Rowling, and I do think the film did the book justice. I really do, because I've read obviously the book, and I think The Prisoner of Azkaban comes across as just as clever, and I think obviously. The writing is superb, but I think the film really did do it justice. I really think it's a great movie. Then we got The Goblet of Fire. Now, The Goblet of Fire, I think, felt the first real epic movie. So, obviously, I've read the book as well. And I think The Goblet of Fire, with the Triwizard Tournament, it really does feel quite epic. But also, I would say it's the first one where, when I read the books, it felt like the first one where quite a bit was left out. I mean, I think, a lot of the J.K. Rowling definitely, she puts a huge amount of descriptive detail into her writing. There are times when I can't remember which one it was. I think it was The Prisoner of Azkaban, actually, where we're about 100 pages in before kind of like we're starting to really get into the crux of the story. So much descriptive detail she puts in. Sometimes, in my opinion, a little bit too much. I think, it's brilliant to be able to picture those images so brilliantly. But sometimes there's so much detail. Obviously some of it feels a little bit unnecessary, almost like she obviously clearly loves descriptive writing. She loves describing every single piece of any setting in so much detail. You could use so many different setting descriptions as a lesson for children in terms of like how to actually write and describe settings and so on, so that the reader can picture it so clearly. But yeah, I think sometimes she does go overboard a little bit, if I'm honest. But The Goblet of Fire really felt epic. It felt, the Triwizard Tournament was absolutely amazing. And obviously Harry, is, entered into this almost like adult world, because obviously he's too young really to enter the Triwizard Tournament, ends up being in there. We have obviously the Quidditch World Cup at the beginning, but that is much, much bigger in The Goblet of Fire, the book. The actual detail that goes into the actual Quidditch World Cup, absolutely huge amount of detail. It's such a big event in the book. and it is glossed over a little bit. It becomes quite a small, rushed little bit at the beginning of The Goblet of Fire as the movie. I do think, that detail for the actual Quidditch World Cup at the beginning of The Goblet of Fire in the book, it's a shame that didn't have much more focus, but I can also see why. There was potentially stuff there that didn't really get into the action quick enough, and it is, there's lots to get through in that film, lots to get through in terms of making sure that book has everything that it needs to. The Goblet of Fire. Also, of course, the first. This is where things change. This is where things start to move from, for example, just a year at Hogwarts, lessons to be learned, and so on, to obviously the return of Voldemort. And then, that obviously signifies a big swing towards good versus evil, towards, for example, Harry and obviously moving into the Order of the Phoenix, the DA, and then obviously Dumbledore's army, of course, and obviously the Death Eaters and so on, and that real battle between them. That is something that, obviously changes at the end of the Goblet of Fire with the death of Cedric Diggory as well. To have such a popular character killed off, that was a real, sign that none of these characters were particularly safe, that J.K. Rowling was prepared to kill off main characters, to kill off characters that, were effectively children. So this was a sign that things could get quite dark, that actually this was a turn in terms of this was not going to be just plain sailing. This was not just going to be good defeats evil every single time. There are going to be casualties of war. There are going to be losses. There are going to be sacrifices. So I think it made it a lot more serious. And obviously the end of the Goblet of Fire, where Dumbledore is effectively being quite honest, and effectively addressing, the entire staff and also all the pupils there, and effectively saying, no, I'm not going to lie to you. Cedric Diggory was murdered. Voldemort has returned, and Dumbledore effectively confirming what Harry has experienced and so on. Always such a good, an aid to Harry as well. So we have that change in mood, really, and that leads into the Order of the Phoenix. Now, the book of the Order of the Phoenix is enormous. It's about 800 pages long. It really is a huge book. Obviously, when they came to the film, and the film is one of the shorter ones as well. I think the film is literally about 2 hours, bang on. Certainly shorter than the film with the Goblet of Fire. Certainly shorter than some of the others. But yeah, the actual book is enormous. And obviously in the film they have left out quite a few bits. And obviously, you could say some of it is a shame. One of the things that really stands out to me when I watched the film, and obviously now having read the book, is that all the stuff with Hermione and the house elves, and the fact that she is this kind of supporter of rights for house elves. None of that happens in any of the films whatsoever. It starts, I think, in about The Prisoner of Azkaban, or maybe The Prisoner of Azkaban, and then she certainly continues through the Goblet of Fire, and certainly it's a big focus in the Order of the Phoenix. She is constantly on about the rights of house elves and making sure that they are supported and not treated badly and so on. None of that happens in the films at all. You wouldn't know any of that's there. And I found that absolutely fascinating to actually go through the books, and having watched the films first, you come to a bit where you're like, this is new. This bit wasn't there. It's quite fascinating to actually, to go through all that and find, kind of like bits that you feel like you're getting, bonus material. And it should be kind of like the other way around. But for me, as someone who watched the films first, when you read the books and you realise there's whole chunks of story that wasn't there, it's almost like getting bonus material or getting deleted scenes and so on. So yeah, I mean the Order of the Phoenix is enormous. Really builds up the relationship between Sirius and Harry as well, and obviously that makes that kind of loss of Sirius at the end so much more poignant, really. And obviously that's something that is going to spur Harry on in terms of the loss of Sirius, and there is continued loss as well. And then we go into the Half-Blood Prince, and obviously. The Half-Blood Prince we find out as we're going along. We've got this book, for example, these messages from the Half-Blood Prince, and the big reveal at the end, of course, is that Snape is the Half-Blood Prince, and Snape appears at the end of the Half-Blood Prince to be this ultimate villain, the kind of second in command to Voldemort. So if you would have it, Darth Vader to the Emperor. We seem to have found that Snape actually all along, Harry was right to be suspicious of him. He was right to think that he wasn't to be trusted. Snape kills Dumbledore, and obviously when you know what happens in the Deathly Hallows, in some ways it's great to be able to. If you're reading the Half-Blood Prince, and you have, and for example, those people who read the Half-Blood Prince before the Deathly Hallows came out, and obviously didn't know what was to come. You almost have to reread the Half-Blood Prince to really get it, to really see what you can see all the clues as you go along. That effectively, that even down to the line where effectively Dumbledore is saying to Snape, please. And at the time, when you're reading the Half-Blood Prince, you think to yourself, all he's actually doing is just, please, Snape, don't do it. Please, Snape, stop. And actually, of course, we know, because obviously I'm assuming everyone, this is spoilers alert, I'm going to go into the end of the Deathly Hallows here, so just in case you're thinking to yourself, oh, hang on a sec, I don't know what happens in these books. Probably best to stop here, because I am going to talk about the Deathly Hallows as well. Maybe come back after you've actually done that, if you, for some reason, are coming to these books for the very, very first time. If you are, though, hope you're enjoying them, because they are amazing. Anyway, that's out the way. Of course, we find out that Snape is potentially the ultimate hero of the entire series. That's that reveal for me is the most powerful. I remember watching that again in the cinema, in the Deathly Hallows, and I had tears. I had genuine tears, and it was so cleverly done, because you were able to see the clues that were dripped in throughout, from the Philosopher's Stone through to the Deathly Hallows, and particularly, obviously, when Snape desperately doesn't want to kill Dumbledore, but has to. It's something that Dumbledore asks him to do. And so, obviously, Dumbledore knows that he's dying because of what's happened to his hand when he destroyed the Horcrux of the ring. And so, that reveal of when Snape actually gives Harry the tears, and then he takes the tears to the Pensieve, and he actually sees the history of what Snape went through, of what Snape was asked to do, and how Snape has literally looked after Harry throughout the entire series, making sure, and a huge sacrifice for himself, because he obviously loved Harry because he loved his mother. Snape obviously loved Lily. And so that sacrifice that he makes is just absolutely incredible. And I think it's just I think it's honestly the most powerful part for me of the Deathly Hallows, is that reveal of Snape. The fact that obviously Snape did that. And yes, the character of Snape is fantastic in the books. He really is. The character of Snape is just, but again, going back to the films, and obviously I all the credit in the world has to go to J.K. Rowling for creating these characters, and for actually really, creating this world, this amazing fantasy world of Hogwarts, and obviously this magical world of wizards and witches and witchcraft and so on. It's all incredible. But for me, that certain characters are brought to life by the actor. And for me, the biggest one that stands out for me every single time is Alan Rickman's portrayal of Snape. One of the few voices I really struggle to do, if I'm honest. I've tried to kind of copy a lot of the actors when I've actually been reading the stories. But Snape is probably one of the hardest to do. You have to just read everything slowly. But no one can really do Alan Rickman's voice apart from Alan Rickman. And so tragic in so many ways that we lost Alan Rickman. I recently watched the 20th anniversary I think they were all getting together. The 20th, I think it was on was it on HBO Max or something like that? But the 20th anniversary of the Philosopher's Stone being released. Obviously, it came out in 2001, and so this was released kind of 2021. So 20 years on, and they got the actors and actresses back together and so on. So we had Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson and Rupert Grint and so many of the others as well. But obviously no Alan Rickman, and it's just such a shame. It really is, because he made Snape for me, and that character, I think it's a good character in the books, but I think Alan Rickman made it a great character, and I think J.K. Rowling would probably agree with that. He's such an essential part of the series, of the books, and so obviously, I think it's one of those things that really stands out. Obviously, the Deathly Hallows, we end up with the ultimate battle. And this is something as well, which again, having read the books now, that really sort of stands out to me is obviously, and this is touched upon in the Order of the Phoenix, and it's not even mentioned really in the film, that actually the prophecy did not actually say whether the actual chosen one was Harry or Neville, but those were the two, that it could be Harry or it could be Neville. Neville's role, he's just this kind of bumbling fool who turns out to be the ultimate hero in the end, but actually there's much more history. This is not completely out of the blue when you read the books, and obviously it is Neville who eventually is the one who destroys the snake, who destroys the actual the Horcrux and so on, which is keeping the last part of power that Voldemort actually has. So that finish with Neville actually being the one to step up with the sword of Gryffindor, is just is really quite fantastic, and it's an amazingly powerful moment when you actually watch the film and so on. But if you have that backstory of that, and obviously the backstory of what Neville's endured with his parents and so on as well at the hands of the Cruciatus Curse from Bellatrix Lestrange, it really is something that has more momentum, more power to it when you've actually read the books as well, I think. But I do think the books and the films complement each other so well. I think the films do the books justice, and the books are amazing pieces of art. There's no doubt about it. They are absolutely fantastic. So there we go. My little whistle-stop tour through the 8 films and obviously 7 books, and how I came across them. So yeah, you'd expect that, obviously I decided to read the Harry Potter books because I was a big fan of the Harry Potter books, and so therefore was going to actually bring them all to life, so that other people could enjoy them. No, I'm reading these for the very first time. This is going to be the biggest revelation of this podcast, really, that I am reading these books for the first time, as I'm reading them. I am reading the episode that has just gone live of the Deathly Hallows Part 3. I think it's chapters 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 or something, 12. Anyway, maybe up to chapter 16. I'm not sure. That's the first time I've ever read them. I've watched the films so many times, and it was just one of those things where I didn't feel the need to read the books. I'd heard lots and lots of times about how there were extra things in the books. Like you've got to read the book because there's the extra bits, or there's bits that you won't know about if you haven't read the book. Oh, this character's different in the book. Oh, this bit's extra. I'd heard all this, but it hadn't persuaded me to read the books. I've led a very, very busy life in terms of working hard as a teacher and so on. And sometimes these books, I thought to myself, I'm not a big reader, which is bizarre. I read all these audiobooks and then do so many for different channels. I've read so many books but I'm not someone who generally just sits at home and reads. I'm very much a film person, if I'm honest. I'm very much a person who likes to just sit down with a movie and sit down, and watch that. That's always been my way. I'm not always a big reader of books. So yeah, that's been a real kind of, when I decided to actually read the Harry Potter books, I thought, right, rather than just me read them, why don't I share them? Why don't I actually read them aloud? It's quite something I took on, and then you think to yourself, goodness me, what have I started? Because obviously, it's an epic journey. It really is, to read the entirety of the 7 Harry Potter books out loud. Is quite an undertaking, but I've loved doing it. I decided to do all the voices. I've always been into drama. I've always been into kind of acting. I used to do some amateur dramatics, having starring roles in kind of some performances and so on and things like that. So I've always loved the acting side of it. And so I just decided to use those really and try and bring the characters' voices to life as well. And they're very much based on the films as much as anything. Harry's probably the most generic one I do. I mean, I don't really do Daniel Radcliffe. I just do me for Harry. That was pretty much, with Hermione, I try to make her a little bit more high pitched and obviously to be very well spoken, because obviously Emma Watson is very well spoken. So I try to make her a bit like that, and particularly in the early ones where she's quite precocious. So that's how I've managed to do that. Ron's a bit more like, becomes laddish and kind of like, whoa, all right, Harry, and stuff. So yeah, I get a little bit based on Rupert Grint, but yeah, he sort of talks like that. And then you've got Dumbledore. Now, obviously, two different actors play Dumbledore, and mine is very much based on the original. Obviously, Michael Gambon took on the character, but mine is very much based on the original Dumbledore, and so yeah, my Dumbledore is always like this, and so I kept that voice, and obviously. That voice changes in the films when we get into The Prisoner of Azkaban, but I decided to keep that voice going throughout, and I think it worked really well. I think it gave that gravitas to Dumbledore, and so yes, that's the voice I chose to do throughout. We've got Professor McGonagall trying to do the Scottish accent as much as I possibly can throughout, so we've got Professor McGonagall as well, and then Snape, as I've said, I just try to speak slowly and accentuate the ends of words, and that's the way I've done the Snape voices. Hagrid, well, coming from Devon myself anyway, and Hagrid has a bit of a southwest from England voice anyway, so it's something I'm quite used to doing, so you just got to be that. If there's long, great big bits from Hagrid, it really does the voice in a little bit, but yeah, I got the Hagrid voice going. What other characters we've got? Voldemort, who whispers a little bit, really, and we just get that Voldemort whisper, quite posh, but at the same time, that menacing voice. That's my Voldemort, and obviously haven't had as much of Voldemort as we are going to have now in the Deathly Hallows. Who else have we got? Who am I forgetting? Oh, Luna Lovegood, doing a little Irish accent like that. Try to be a little wispy and stuff. And yeah, try to do it a little bit like that. There was one recently where Luna was doing the commentating. She was doing the commentating for a Quidditch match. And this is the thing, when you're doing all the different voices, you have to read on ahead to see who's actually talking, because otherwise you can do the wrong voice. So I did this whole generic normal voice. I thought it was Dean Thomas doing the commentary, as he does in some of the earlier books. And then I realised it was Luna, so I had to stop, and I thought, oh, God, I can't just put that out as, pretend that Luna's suddenly speaking like that. So you have to stop, you have to re-record the whole thing, go back to maybe earlier in the chapter, and come back up to it, and then you know that it's going to be Luna, because you got to get those voices as accurate as you can. Now and again, I'll get it wrong, and if it's just very, very minor, I might carry on. There are other ones that are relatively generic, Fred and George, for example. Mad-Eye Moody, I do just, like he's a bit gruff and so on. Who else have I got? Which other characters am I thinking of? Oh, Lupin is quite posh, and Sirius as well, kind of like, just talks a bit like that. Just a little bit on Gary Oldman, but not so much really. It's just, again, just a bit of a posh voice. Him and Lupin's very similar. So yeah, and then you've got Lucius Malfoy, who talks like this, and of course, Dobby the house elf. Hello, Harry Potter. Oh, Dobby will talk like this. Now, Dobby the house elf is just one of those ones that will always stand out to me as well, because my surname, again, little reveals about me as I go along. Obviously, from the James Talks podcast that my first name is James. My surname is Dobbinson. And I started as a teacher, and in my first couple of years of teaching, again, before I'd read the books, before I'd really watched the films, The Chamber of Secrets comes out as a book, and J.K. Rowling introduces Dobby the house elf. Now, for someone who was teaching in a school, and their surname was Dobbinson, it was not ideal to have Dobby the house elf, especially with how Dobby looked, and how Dobby was, this squeaky little character that would bang his head against things if he actually did anything wrong and so on. He wasn't the hero that you wanted to be compared to, really. So yeah, Dobby the house elf came out, and then of course people were going, oh, I still get it today sometimes, especially now I'm doing supply kind of substitute teaching, where I go into different schools and so on, and I'll go, hi everyone, my name's Mr. Dobbinson, I'm going to be with you today, and you will get the odd child to be like, oh, like Dobby the house elf from Harry Potter. Yes, of course, right, yeah, but we won't dwell on that. But yes, Dobby always talks like this, and then Creature, I do the Creature voice a bit like this. So yeah, I try to bring the characters to life. I think I would like to think it makes it a more interesting listen when you're actually listening to these stories. You're actually thinking to yourself, right, okay, it kind of just makes it more like you're almost like sitting back, and there is an element of the film to it, but I think it adds to that escapism of having the characters having different voices. And I think it is what sets my audiobooks apart from some others. I listen to... Because when I was actually thinking about doing this, especially when I started to get copyright issues, I was thinking, well, am I being harshly treated here, or are other people experiencing this? So I tried to find other examples of the Harry Potter audiobooks on YouTube, and I found one, and it was an American woman, and she just talked so slowly. I get criticized sometimes for the speed at which I read. Some people have said this is too fast. Oh, why don't you slow down? Take a breath. Most of the people who comment are very, very complimentary and say really, really nice things. But I do get some people who sort of say, like, oh, this is too fast. But I tend to just, read at the speed I read. And also I think it really helps keep the pace of there's a lot of action. There's a lot of really dramatic stuff in these books. I think if you really slow it down, you lose that. I was listening to this woman, and she was like, Harry entered Hagrid's cabin. He walked slowly up to... I was thinking, well, I wouldn't want to listen to that. And then I noticed when there was the bit where, sit down, please, said Hagrid. I was like, so all the characters are going to sound exactly the same. Okay. So then I thought, right, no, when I do it, I'm going to do all the characters' voices, and it will be harder work, and you're going to have to work ahead. But I want this to be, as close to kind of a combination of the books and the movies as you can possibly get. And it's hard work, and I do make mistakes. I go at quite a pace, and because I go at quite a pace, I do make mistakes. And some people have said, oh, you've made mistakes. I've even had some people like the mistakes. They feel like it brings a certain kind of real kind of realness to it, really, and sometimes I will try to do a chapter in one take if I can. Very little editing goes on. I literally just sit down with a book, and I just record. I go into a voice memo, and I just start off the chapter, and off I go. If it all starts to go really wrong, or if I realize that I've pronounced a character's name wrong or something like that, then yeah, I will go back and I will re-record and so on. And I've had times where I've literally got 10, 15 minutes into it, and I realised, I think the latest example of that was Xenophilius Lovegood, and I realised I was pronouncing his name completely differently. Even then, even now I don't know if I've pronounced it correctly, but anyway, I realised I was pronouncing it completely wrongly, definitely wrongly. And I'd got about 15 minutes in, I was halfway through a chapter, and I just thought, no, I have standards. I want this to be as good as possible. So yeah, I redid the whole thing. It's I try to make them as good as I possibly can, but there are going to be the odd mistake. And sometimes I've had a couple of people saying, "Oh, you're saying a spell wrong." I consider myself a Potterhead? Not really. I love Harry Potter. I love the books. I love the films. I love the actors from the films, and I love reading it, but I'm not someone who knows everything there is to know about Harry Potter. I'm not, so sometimes I might read a spell and I might get a comment saying, you pronounced that incorrectly. Again, there are characters' names. I think Phineas Nicholas or Nigellus, who knows? I started pronouncing it a certain way, and once you have gone down a certain route, I don't know whether I pronounced that correctly or not. That one always stands out to me. But and I even had someone saying I was being offensive by the way I was actually saying it. No offense was intended whatsoever. I literally just read it how I saw it on the page. But anyway, there are going to be mistakes, but that's how it goes. Anyway, that's a lot about me reading the books and so on and things like that, and the little bits and so on. So Harry Potter, as I say, I'm so glad people have enjoyed the content. It's something that I really undertook to do. I will continue to kind of upload the Deathly Hallows. Part 3 has gone live today. So yeah, I'm going to continue to do that. And if I get hit by some copyright strikes again in the future, as happened on Home of Potter, then we'll have to start again. I will again try to kind of like have a channel ready to go, just so that people can find it. Try to use those same thumbnails so people can recognize my content, and hopefully people can pick it up and enjoy them again and again and again. I've got them all recorded. I've got them all kept. So hopefully people will be able to enjoy them again and again. That's the idea. And I know some people have already listened to some of them, more than once. So that's lovely to hear. If I can brighten your day, then that gives me a kind of, sounds really cheesy, little warm glow inside. But I love the fact that, people are enjoying it. And the fact that it's, all across the world. That's the thing about Harry Potter as well. It's so global. I think that's also one of the problems in terms of copyright, is because it's so global, it's so big. So many people have got, a piece of the pie, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, I love the fact that it has this appeal to so many different people of all ages as well. There'll be kids, there'll be people, as I say, in their 70s and their 80s, kind of like... Harry Potter has something for everyone. And that's the magic of it, really. That is the absolute magic of Harry Potter, is that it actually has this real magical quality, which can appeal to pretty much anyone. You can see yourself in different characters and so on. So yeah, there we go. I will be doing future podcasts about Harry Potter as well. As I say, that is where a lot of people have come here from. But there's going to be a focus to each podcast. And it's just, again, generally me rambling on about something, really. That's all this episode has been, really. Me just having a ramble about how I got into Harry Potter, the history of what and really what I think of them. Oh, I did say I was going to say my favourites. So here we go. I'm not going to rank them in order all the way through, but... my favourite one, and as I say, there is a correlation between the books and the films, really. But my favourite one of the lot, my favourite three, in fact, I'm not even sure I can order them, but my favourite three are The Goblet of Fire, The Prisoner of Azkaban, and The Deathly Hallows. Those are my three favourites. So I'd be interested to know what your favourites are as well. Do feel free to leave any comments. In the not too distant future, I might well do like a bit of a Q&A and just a whole load of shout outs as well. So, this is something I used to do on one of my previous channels, was just shout outs and so on. But yeah, that's the, how the podcast's going to work. There'll be a focus to each one, and it'll just be me rambling on about that in general, and seeing where it takes me. This one here, I haven't planned this at all. There's no script. I don't just sit there and think, right, I don't have a bullet pointed list. I was talking to my wife about doing this, and she was saying how, you probably need to think about where the episode's going to go. You need to think about, what you're going to say. And I was like, nah, I think I'm just going to waffle on, because I can do that. I'm not someone who pauses for breath a great deal. So yeah, I just thought we'll see what happens. If it ends up, I thought to myself, if after 5 minutes it's total nonsense, I'll stop and start again. But hey, we've gone, what's that, 42 minutes of me just waffling on about something, and it's been all right. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've found it relatively interesting. Feel free to put any comments that you'd like to. Yeah. We'll be back soon. I'll be back soon with another podcast on this channel. Not entirely sure what it's going to be about yet. I shall be giving it some thought and thinking, right, what should be my focus for the next one? If you've got any suggestions, feel free, because that's where I want this to go, really. I want it to be very interactive. I want it to be something that you have some say in and so on. So if you've got something you'd really like to make a focus for a future podcast, do put it in the comments, please, and I shall keep those in mind. And actually, maybe if something seems to be really popular, if I got a lot of comments about the same thing, then perhaps we can do that. But it's going to be a little bit of me as well, things that I'm interested in, things that are going on in the world as well. Sometimes they might be a little bit more topical about, certain things, a little bit, more about me and my past and my history and so on and things like that as well. It's going to have a personal edge to it as well, but we're just going to see what happens, really. So that was episode 2 of the James Talks podcast. As you can see, it just really is James talking, really. That's all it is. But today's focus has been about Harry Potter, the wonder, the magic of the world of Hogwarts and Harry Potter. Thank you, J.K. Rowling, and thank you everyone else for listening. Thank you. I will be back soon with another episode of the James Talks podcast. And if you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that would be very much appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye bye.